Welcome to the Daily Stoic, where each day we read a short passage designed to help you cultivate the strength, insight, and wisdom necessary for living the good life. Each one of these passages is based on the 2,000-year-old philosophy that has guided some of history's greatest men and women. For more, you can visit us at dailystoic.com.
Hey everyone, today's sponsor of the podcast is Athletic Greens. As someone who's always tried to be active, exercising, traveling, and now wrangling my kids, it's hard to get the right mix of nutrients in the food I eat. There's so much to keep track of, and it ends up taking a ton of time and effort. Athletic Greens is a great product because it's got more than 75 vitamins, minerals, and other whole food sourced ingredients to make it easier for you to maintain nutrition without taking a bunch of pills or supplements. You just mix a scoop of Athletic Greens into some water and you're good to go. So whether you're taking steps towards a healthier lifestyle or you're an athlete pushing for better performance, Athletic Greens gives you the nutrients you need for your body to survive. Visit athleticgreens.com/stoic to claim your special offer today. Receive 20 free travel packs with your first purchase. Those travel packs make it easier for you to cover your nutritional bases when you're on the road. So check it out, athleticgreens.com/stoic to get your free travel pack today. Hey everyone, welcome to another Saturday episode of the Daily Stoic. Really excited about this week's episode because we're doing Ask Daily Stoic with another author, with a great friend of mine, Austin Kleon. Austin Kleon wrote Steal Like an Artist, Keep Going, Show Your Work. He has Steal Like an Artist journal. Even his poetry is really great. He does these newspaper blackout poems. He's awesome. You can check him out on Instagram. I think it's at Austin Kleon. But I thought I would tell a quick, somewhat funny story about Austin. When I first moved to Austin, Texas, I'd always been a big fan of Austin Kleon, and our books had both come out at roughly the same time. This is 2012, 2013. I shot Austin an email and he said, "Hey, I live right down the street. I'll take you to lunch." And so we met for lunch at a place that no longer exists in Austin because everything is getting torn down and replaced. But so we had lunch. I remember I had meatloaf. I don't remember what Austin had, but then Austin was like, "I'm going to drive you around and show you the town." And so we were driving, and I think Austin was going slow, or the person behind him was in front of him was going slow. Anyways, you know how it goes. Like somebody honked, somebody flipped another person off, and then road rage ensued. Not by Austin, but by this person who was mad at us. So this person sort of races around us, it honks, and then it sort of disappears. And we think that's going to be the end of it. And we're driving around Austin, and then we're coming up. This is on Airport Boulevard in Austin. If you know, sort of, there's like a Long John Silver's. There's like sort of MLK, between 12th and MLK on Airport Boulevard. And we're driving, and all of a sudden, I see out of the corner of the eye, maybe like 200 or 300 yards up the road, the guy that had been honking at us. And I said, "Austin, that's the guy. He's like gone around and is like cutting us off." And Austin's like, "No way, that's insane." And I'm like, "Austin, he's out of the car." The guy had gotten out of his car, gotten in front of us, gotten out of his car. And I see him reach into his car, and I'm like, "Oh man, this is not going to go well. Is he going to shoot us? Like, what's going to happen?" And then he grabs like one of those like 52-ounce giant sodas from 7-Eleven that he had in his car, and he hurls it, and I see it hurtling through the air, not like a perfect spiral like a football. It's just sort of hurtling through the air, and I'm like doing the math in my head about like looking at the trajectory, seeing where it's going, and then it occurs to me that the window of the car is open, and I go, "There's no way he can't possibly hit a moving car from that distance with a cup full of soda. That's the craziest thing I ever heard." But sure enough, it's coming, and Austin kind of slams on the brakes, and it lands on the hood of the car and the windshield, and it just explodes everywhere. And that was my welcome to Austin, Texas, by Austin Kleon. It's one of the craziest things I've ever seen in my life, one of the weirdest things in my life, and I think a good reminder of this Stoic idea of anger always makes stuff worse. Seneca had this great joke. He said, like, you would never return a bite to a dog or a kick to a mule. And I laugh so hard when I think about this guy, whatever Austin could have possibly done to him, no matter how mad he could have possibly been by this experience of not liking someone's driving. He literally wildly drove, cut us off, laid in wait, and then threw a giant soda. And he almost nailed it. I mean, if it had exploded in the car, I mean, it would have been unreal, and yet so preposterous. So sometimes when I get upset, I think about that guy, and I think about him when I'm driving all the time, and I wonder what he's up to. I can't imagine things are going well, because that does not seem like a personality well suited to this aggravating world that we live in. Well, that's my intro for Austin Kleon. I think he did a great job answering these questions, and I can't wait for you guys to listen. March 14th, the Daily Stoic. Self-deception is our enemy. Zeno would also say that nothing is more hostile to a firm grasp on knowledge than self-deception. Self-deception, delusions of grandeur, these aren't just annoying personality traits. Ego is more than just off-putting and obnoxious. Instead, it's the sworn enemy of our ability to learn and grow. As Epictetus put it, it is impossible for a person to begin to learn that which he thinks he already knows. Today, we will be unable to improve, unable to learn, unable to earn the respect of others if we think we're already perfect, a genius admired far and wide. In this sense, ego and self-deception are the enemies of things we wish to have because we delude ourselves into believing we already possess them. So we must meet ego with the hostility and contempt that it insidiously deploys against us, to keep it away, if only for 24 hours at a time. Hey everyone, today's sponsor is Leesa, the online mattress company. You might think that the Stoics were just total hard asses who sort of white knuckled it, never slept, were always working. But I think if you read the opening passage of Book 5 in Meditations, you see that Marcus Aurelius both cherishes and loves a good night's sleep, but he also knows there's a time for being asleep and a time for being awake. But I think he would grant that when you're asleep, you should sleep well. Leesa will ship a good night's sleep directly to your doorstep. Each of their mattresses is made to order and shipped free right to your door. You open the box and the mattress inflates right there. All mattresses come with a 100-night trial and a 10-year warranty, so you can feel confident in your investment and a good night's sleep. And plus, the Leesa Hybrid mattress has been rated the best overall mattress by sites like Business Insider, Wirecutter, and Mattress Advisor. And not only that, but Leesa donates one mattress for every 10 that they sell. So when you buy a Leesa mattress, you are helping someone in need get a good night's sleep. With the Stoics, we talk about sympatheia, that we're all made for each other, that we do works for the common good. It's great when supporting a company or doing something that you need helps someone else in need. So that's awesome. Just visit Leesa.com today. Daily Stoic listeners get 15% off their entire order with the code STOIC. Again, that's Leesa.com. The code is STOIC. Shop today. All right, welcome to this week's episode of Ask Daily Stoic. People send in their questions, info@dailystoic.com, and then usually I answer them, but sometimes we have awesome guests. Today's guest is Austin Kleon, one of my favorite writers. If you haven't read Steal Like an Artist, you definitely should. I think it was a profoundly influential book for me as a writer. If you're not a writer or a creative, but you're thinking about this, I think your most philosophical book is the new one, Keep Going, which is like sort of how does one find hope and optimism and structure inside the chaos of the modern world.
Right.
So we got some questions. So the first question today is from Jim. So he said he's read the Daily Stoic emails, watched the YouTube channel, that he knows the Stoics were big on the practice of journaling. Was journaling their approach to meditation or simply reflecting on their day? What Stoic approaches do they have to improve creativity? So let's start with that with you, because I think that, how does journaling help foster creativity in your practice?
I think that what journaling does is it shows you what you're actually thinking. Now, that might sound really weird, but I think a lot of people think that writing is about having an idea and then putting it down on the page.
Sure.
Where writing is actually about figuring out what you think as you're writing it. So a lot of times when I really sit down and journal in the free way that I do it, I'll discover things that I didn't know I was thinking about.
Sure.
And things will come out of me. You know, your brain is working on stuff all the time, but you don't know what it is.
Yep.
So when you let your brain kind of speak to the page, then you like sort of see what you've got. And that is essentially a creative act, in that you're making something new in the world that even you didn't know existed. And so I think it's pretty rare in our lives that we have situations in which we can just kind of let our kind of subconscious or our what we're, let things happen, basically. And I think there's a freedom to journaling that you don't even really know the full depths of what you're thinking until you really sit down and start writing about it.
I think that's totally right. And I think if we're tying journaling to Stoicism, one of the things they're obviously doing is writing things they already know or they've already thought. So there's a repetition to it. So also the idea of journaling as like priming the pump, as sort of getting yourself going with sort of things like sort of riffing, like in the way if you were sitting down with a guitar to warm up, you would play through scales, or you would play through, like the riffs from some of your favorite songs, or go through different chord progressions. You're warming up to get to a place where then you can be improvisational or you can be creative. Very few people can just like go from 0 to 60. You have to warm yourself up. And so for me, journaling is like, it's stretching a little bit. It's warming myself up. It's doing the act of writing, but with no real intention other than for doing it. And then, sometimes you pop up ideas, or I also like one of the reasons, we have this in the Daily Stoic Journal, is like the idea of prompts, like also giving yourself a question to respond to is a way to maybe get started.
I think that's a big problem for a lot of people, is they look at a blank page and they're like, what should I write down? And so I think having a prompt, having like, I know some writers that it's like, I think it was Lydia Davis. She said like, I just never look at a blank page. That just doesn't happen. So, she'll either, I even find that just writing the date at the top of the page is enough writing to just get me, okay, I'm in that mode now. I just really believe, as someone who also draws, there's something about the lines that you put down influence what comes next. Like the lines sort of speak to you and give you new ideas. Like just seeing yourself write a word or a sentence then kickstart something else in your brain. So I think it's really just about the doing.
Okay. I love that. All right. So the next question is from Ryan Ling. He says, my wife and I just had our first son 11 weeks ago. Prior to his son's arrival, he was on track reading, he was mastering new skills, etc. He did our read to lead challenge. I think you know where this is going.
Yes.
So now that their son is here, it's hard to find time to read and focus and learn while he is reading. Do we have any advice for making time to read or making books stick while he's so sleep deprived? It says, I don't want to miss time with my son or miss out on reading. I'll let you go first.
My advice would be to give yourself a year. I just think the first year of having any kid is kind of a wash. I would say I'm a big fan of like, what's the one-armed version of what you can do?
Okay.
Like, so like, what can you hold a baby?
Yeah, sure.
And like do
so audiobooks.
So like audiobooks. I have a buddy who swears by the new AirPods.
Yes.
Because he can just like have that going while he's like with the kid, rocking it.
There's no cord to get in the way.
I would also give yourself the excuse to read things that you think might be below your level.
Yes.
Like to just like one of the things I've been doing that I do at the breakfast table is I read books for kids. So like I just read a history book that was written for kids in the 30s, and it's amazing. It's like, it's a better world history than I've ever read before, but it's technically below my like reader level, but it's what my brain can handle in the morning. But my main advice to new parents is to go easy on yourself.
Totally. Like, you have a much more important thing than reading, and you can learn so much about yourself, about humanity, about biology from just like actually engaging in this experience that you're in.
And don't discredit. You should read whatever you want to read to them.
Like, they're not understanding anything that's happening. So just that what they like is your voice.
Yeah.
So, so read either read, like we're just starting to go through the children's illustrated classics right now.
I love those.
But also, just read whatever if you're reading a business book, read the business book out loud. Like they're not going to notice.
They don't.
So that's definitely one thing I would do. Yeah. Take it easy. Sometimes you're going to be so frightened. You just need to like relax and veg out in front of the television. Don't feel bad about that
Yeah.
at all, I don't think. Although we just started doing something in the car, I realized it was like, I was like, I listen to podcasts myself. I was like, so this is for a slightly older than an 11-week-old, obviously, but I was like, what could we listen to that would make my kid better?
Yeah.
And so I found these old radio recordings of Aesop's fables.
Oh, cool.
And so like some of them are real dark, but like I was like, oh, like people have been learning. This is what we would have sat around the campfire or the fireplace in our log cabin, 150 years ago. And well, no, not the radio. You'd be reading Hans Christian Andersen, or you'd be reading, Aesop or whatever. Like, so also just start actively thinking about like, what are the ideas or lessons or morals you want to teach your kids, and you can read those too. Is what I would think.
That's nice. I like that.
And the other question we get a lot related to this will go like, how can I introduce, like Stoicism to my kids? That's the other thing we're starting to think about, is like, don't baby your kids when it comes to books. Like, just read them the Stoics. Like, like an 8-year-old 1,000 years ago would have been expected to read Seneca in the original Latin at age 8. You know what I mean? Like, so like, let them read it. They don't have to understand it, but let them read it, or encourage them to read it, or read them passages. Like, I think the idea of babying your kids when it comes to books is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, so we started doing the Aesop's fables, and it's like, he's 3, a little over 3. He's talking to me about, I can tell he's at least getting that the animals are up to things. Right. Do you know what I mean? Right. And like, so we'll listen to him 100 times and eventually he'll get it. But like, why not start that instead of dumb kid songs?
I mean, my kids both read now, and you read to them a lot, and you have to make sure that they see you reading, and that you have a lot of books in the house too. Like, I find this with parents all the time, is that they want their kids to do things that they don't do themselves. Yes. Like, how can I get my kid to learn the violin or play the piano? It's like, well,
what skill are you practicing?
What instrument do you practice in front of them?
Right. They want to do what you're doing. Yeah. And most of the time you're watching TV or typing on your phone. Yeah. And then you're surprised that they only want to touch the phone.
That's what they want to do. I was really, for a while we were thinking about homeschooling our kids, and we still reserve that option. But, one of the guys that I got super into when I was reading about that, he's a guy named John Holt, and he wrote some really beautiful books in the 70s and 80s. And his big thing about kids is he felt that children weren't in the world seeing adults doing real work enough, that they were sort of siloed off at school, and that they didn't get to. Now, a lot of us do work that isn't very demonstratable. Yeah. I mean, we do sit in front of a computer all day, but that's why I think it's so important at home, is to have like physical activities that they see you doing.
One of the first emails we wrote for Daily Dad, which is the other thing we do other than Daily Stoic, but it was like, let them see you work. Like, the work can't, like how they created those cargo cults, like where people would see the planes land, these, indigenous people would see these planes land. They didn't get where it was coming from or whatever. Work can't be this place that you go and disappear to and come home, and like they vaguely understand that it's related to money and related to you have to bring them into what you're doing, so they learn to love it, and they learn to see that it's something that you love, and that it's something to be admired, and that it's a part of you, not a hidden thing that you do behind closed doors. And I think reading is a great example of that. Yeah, if you want them to read, show them day to day the ROI of reading. Show that it's a place of connection with you. Show that it has a outsized role in your life. Like, don't talk about it, be about it. You know what I mean? And that's the key.
For me, the hardest thing about parenting is that you have to become the kind of man that you want them to be.
Sure.
Like, you have to become the kind of human being that you want them to become. And that's the hardest job. Well, no, for me, that's the hardest part of parenting. Honestly,
that's Marcus Aurelius' thing. We have this print. I have it actually on the way up to my office. I have the original, like the actual sort of letterpress metal thing that they made it on. Like, as I think it looks even cooler. But he says, like, let's waste no more time talking about what a good man is. He says, be one. And I think, it's like, you can read a million parenting books. You can ask for advice from all these, but like, just doing the shit is like the way to do it. Like, you got to be about it.
I would also encourage specifically dads. I think a real trap for a man who's starting out as a father is to think about all these things you're going to teach them.
Yeah.
I'm going to teach them how to ride a bike. I'm going to teach them about Marcus Aurelius. I'm going to teach them how to shoot a basketball, all this stuff.
Yeah.
You are not going to teach them that much. What you are going to do is you're going to set up a world in which they're going to learn things.
Yeah.
And if you can modify your thoughts in that way, if you can think about, I'm going to create an environment for them, I'm going to be a model for them in which they can learn to do these things that I want them to learn.
Sure.
It sounds like a small readjustment. It will save you so much heartache to think about yourself as a person who creates spaces in which your kids can learn things versus directly teaching them. Because having a curriculum and having things that you want to teach people learn when they're ready for things. I would encourage other men in particular, because I think women on the whole are better at nurturing and growing what wants to be there. I would just encourage a lot of other men to think about, you're creating a space in which your child will become who they are.
I think this ties into the craft of writing too, because that's the note you get the most often, right? It's like show, don't tell.
Yeah.
You illustrate the story. You actually don't have to put the conclusion on it. It lingers. And it's actually, when the people feel like they're uncovering it themselves, it's actually more powerful than when you rammed it down their throats.
If you want to raise a reader,
yes,
then growing up in a house in which people read all the time is probably a good start, right?
Yeah, totally. Totally. All right. So Paul, this is our last question. He's asking me, but I'll be very curious for your take. He's saying, do I see myself as a Stoic thinker who has contributed to the school of Stoicism, or a writer, motivational speaker who popularized the ancient Stoics' works? I was rereading Gregory Hayes' translation of Marcus Aurelius recently, and he had this interesting thing where he's like, if you asked Marcus whether he was a Stoic philosopher, he probably would have said no. He would have said, I study philosophy. I think going around calling yourself a Stoic, definitely going around calling yourself a philosopher, is to miss the point and is pretty douchey, to be perfectly honest. But I think this idea of contributing or popularizing, that's a topic you tackle really well. So talk about how one sort of remixes or works with, great source material.
Well, I think this is what all writers do. They just maybe aren't as explicit about it as what you're doing with Stoicism. I mean, if you think about what all artists and writers do, is they sort of take who came before them and they just kind of they become a mashup of all those people, and then they sort of update what they've learned from all those people who came before them to the specific context. So, I mean, I think about this a lot in terms of, when you're a young artist and you're starting out, you might want to be Picasso, but you aren't alive in his context.
Sure.
So you have to kind of deconstruct what made him an interesting artist.
Right. Yeah. You don't live in New York in the 70s. Right. So stop trying to pretend you do.
So you can't be Andy Warhol.
Yeah.
But one of the things you can take from one of my artistic heroes is David Hockney. He's a painter and an artist who's worked forever. But one of the things that instead of Hockney did these really interesting experiments with fax machines and copiers and photo printing and stuff like that. One of the things you could be like, oh, I'm going to do fax machine art or something. That when you're younger, you're like, oh, I want to get this, I want to do fax machine art like Hockney or whatever. No, what you need to take is Hockney engaged with the technologies of his time to try to advance the kind of art he was trying to make. So just trying to extrapolate the right lessons from the people you look up to and then updating them for the context. That's what all artists do. And I think that what you're doing with Stoicism is just a more explicit version of that.
Oh, I think one of the things you learn as a writer is that, and I think this is actually a very critical thing in Stoic philosophy too, is it's not for me to say whether I'm contributing or not. It's for me to do work that I find interesting and compelling and fulfilling. And by the way, that in a way that the market supports, right? Because I don't admire starving artists. Do you know what I mean? Because the art's not getting seen. So for me, the job is to write about what I'm interested in and what is resonating and working with a whole host of factors. whether that makes me a popularizer or, an original, whether that makes me a philosopher or a self-help person or what, like the labels that other people put on me I have to always remind myself, like, or not only are they not mine to say, but are like actually irrelevant and meaningless. What matters to me and what I have to always be focused on is the work. Like whether they call you a poet or a author or an artist or a hack, right? Like whatever they call you, that's not, you don't control that, and you got to like tune that out and just focus on like how you see yourself. And like there is that debate in writing, like, can I call myself a writer? Am I a writer? It's like, I think you primarily answer that question with your work.
And I think there's these like two schools of thought when it comes to like creative work now. It's like there are some people out there who write, you're an artist. Just call yourself an artist, and then you can make art. Yeah. I'm the opposite. I'm like, don't worry about being an artist. Just make art. And then when you're an artist, you'll know because people will call you an artist. I mean, that is my approach to it. I mean, who could call themselves an architect who hadn't practiced architecture? You know what I mean? So, and it comes back down to that, if you want to be the noun, do the verb thing again. But I just think that the other thing that I think is really constrictive about what we're talking about here is nouns are like solid objects. And if you think of yourself as just, like if I just thought of myself as a poet, would I draw? Would I make comics?
It's delimiting.
It's very limiting to think of that's why I call myself like a writer who draws. That's usually how I describe myself to people. Yeah. And that sort of leaves open possibilities. But I never think of myself as like a speaker, even though that's like how I make a good part of my living. Totally. Like the speaking is a byproduct.
It's a verb that you do.
It's something I do. I speak.
When I think actually like identity is a real dangerous, tricky thing. And so like, for me, like when people go like, you're at parties, so, oh, what do you do? I'm like, I'm a writer. And then I hope the conversation ends there. I don't have to talk to you anymore. And then they go, oh, what do you write? And then I go, books. And then like, hopefully they'll leave it there. Yeah. And then like, oh, what do you write about? And I go like business books and then, or whatever, like I did not become a writer to talk about it at dinner parties. Like it's almost like a private joy and privilege that I have that I get to do this thing. That's what it is. And then the awkwardness of the labels is almost like a curse that goes with the blessing of the thing. Do you know what I mean? Like if I could tell people, I used to just tell people like, oh, I'm in marketing because like they would leave me alone and then I don't have to
I sell used cars.
Yes,
do you need one?
Right.
No.
Like Paul Graham has this great essay called Keep Your Identity Small. And he's like, labels make you stupider. And like, so if you call yourself a poet, you're saying I'm not these other things or I am this thing. Yeah. It's like when you call yourself a Republican or a Democrat, you have now limited your ideology to a party when you should just be like, think what you think, and like I vote for this party or that party, but I am not that. Right. That is like, think about it. If you're like a Cleveland Browns fan, you don't say like, I'm on the Cleveland Browns, like you're not, I'm a Brown, right? Like you don't identify, you don't put yourself on the sports team, And so it's like, I think some distance, it's like to go to back to the questions, like I see myself as someone who writes about philosophy, whether 1,000 years from now I am lumped in with philosophers or if I'm utterly forgotten or if I'm just like a person who wrote some books that people read, like one, I'll be dead, so I don't give a shit. But two, like I'll let the work answer that question.
I couldn't say it better.
All right. Let's close it there. Well, thanks so much. This was really cool.
It's fun for me.
If you guys have more questions, you can write in at info@Daily Stoic, and then definitely check out Austin's stuff. So are you at Austin Kleon pretty much everywhere?
Yeah, everywhere. AustinKleon.com, at Austin Kleon on Twitter and Instagram. And
your Instagram's great. Your drawings are there.
My drawings are there. My favorite thing I do is my weekly newsletter.
I was going to bring this
up. And that's on my website. Every week I send out a free list of 10 things I think are cool that week. And it's simple and fun. And it's like my favorite thing I do online. So
I love it. I've got it a long time. All right. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. And if you don't get the Daily Stoic email, go to dailystoic.com/email.